If you want to understand what's really happening to your money right now, why it feels like you're earning more but somehow ending up with less, you need to face an uncomfortable truth. A silent wealth transfer is happening in America at this exact moment. And if you aren't paying attention, you are the one funding it. Not through taxes, not through obvious expenses, not even through the choices you think you're making. It's happening through something far quieter, far more dangerous, and far more deceptive. Losses you can't feel until it's too late. Because the most devastating kind of financial damage is never the damage you see coming. It's the kind that hides behind normalcy, behind routine, behind the illusion that everything is fine. And that right there is how people lose decades of work without ever realizing it. So let's start with the hardest truth of all. One, you are being robbed through mathematics. You don't see it. Inflation isn't a number. It's not 3%. It's not 7%. It's not whatever headline you last scrolled past. Inflation is a transfer of purchasing power. You don't lose dollars. You lose what dollars do. You lose opportunity, leverage, optionality, time. Think about it. If you held $10,000 in cash last year, you still have $10,000 today. Same number, same bills, same bank balance. But what can that $10,000 actually buy? Less food, less rent, less healthcare, less security. Your money stayed still while the world moved forward without you. And that difference, the gap between what your money was able to buy and what it can now buy, didn't just vanish. It moved to someone else. Because inflation isn't an accident. It's a systematic redistribution from people who hold still to people who move, from savers to spenders of borrowed money, from the cautious to the strategic, from the people who store value in cash to the people who store value in anything that changes faster than cash decays. You feel poorer because mathematically you are. And the transfer happens silently, automatically, without permission, every second, every hour, every day. Two, the danger isn't inflation itself, it's what inflation makes you believe. Most people think inflation is about rising prices. Wrong. Inflation is about shrinking value. When milk goes from $3 to $4, the milk didn't get better. Your money got worse. This distinction matters because it reveals the core psychological trap. You don't notice the laws until the numbers scream loud enough. Humans adapt, quietly, subconsciously. If rent goes up $50, 1 month, you shrug. If groceries creep higher over a year, you adjust your meals. If utilities rise bit by bit, you absorb the hit. You don't recognize the pattern. You only feel the pressure. And that pressure creates a deeper illusion. If I just save a little more, things will get better. But they won't, because you can't save your way out of a system designed to dilute savings. And this is the moment most people get trapped. They cling to cash because it feels safe. It feels responsible. It feels conservative. You can see it. You can count it. You can hold it. Cash is tangible, predictable, comforting, which is exactly why it's the most dangerous place to hide. Because safety isn't the same as stability. In fact, the safest looking choices often create the deepest long-term losses. 3, why holding cash is actually the riskiest move you can make. Let's use a simple mental model. Charlie Munger loved inversion. Instead of asking, what's the safest way to protect my money? Ask, if I wanted to guarantee that I lose purchasing power every year, what would I do? The answer comes instantly. Hold cash. Sit still, wait, that's all it takes. Because cash is the only asset guaranteed to decline in value. Not maybe, not possibly, not in certain conditions. Guaranteed. If inflation is 6%, holding cash means you're promising to lose 6% of your real value before you even get out of bed. If inflation is 3%, same thing, you lose 3% of your value automatically. Imagine a bucket with a permanent leak, a slow drip, barely noticeable, but continuous. You keep pouring water in. You keep working harder. You keep earning more. But the level never rises because the leak is faster than you're pouring. And most people, tragically, focus on pouring faster instead of fixing the leak. 4. Why people wait for the right moment and lose everything. Here is the most human flaw of all. We wait. We wait for the stars to align, for certainty, for stability, for the moment when everything feels right. But here's the psychological trap. The right moment never arrives because inflation works like entropy, always increasing, always eroding, always making the future look more uncertain than the past. So people wait, and they lose another year of purchasing power, and another, and another. Time is the enemy you notice last. By the time most people realize they waited too long, the gap is too large to close. And here's the brutal irony. Waiting feels responsible. Waiting feels careful. Waiting feels smart. But in a system where decay is constant, waiting is the fastest route to guaranteed loss. If you want proof, just look at this. Imagine inflation. Averages only 3% per year, a number often quoted as normal. Over 20 years, that means your money loses 45% of its purchasing power. Almost half. You didn't spend it. You didn't waste it. You didn't make a mistake. You just waited. 5. The quietest loss is always the biggest. A dramatic financial crash grabs attention. People panic. Headlines explode. Everyone scrambles, but a slow, silent erosion, nobody notices. Inflation is financial hypertension. No symptoms, no alarms, no immediate pain. But the damage builds quietly until it's irreversible. And this is where the silent wealth transfer accelerates. Because while the majority lose purchasing power quietly for a smaller group benefits massively, not because they're smarter, not because they're luckier, but because they understand one rule: money doesn't stay still. You either move with it or it moves without you. 6. The illusion of safety is more dangerous than risk itself, and let's confront the hardest psychology of all. People cling to cash because it gives them the illusion of control. You can open your banking app and see the number. It makes you feel anchored, grounded, stable. But stability without growth is decay. Safety without progress is regression. A plateau is never really a plateau. It's a slow slide disguised as stillness. Ask yourself this. If you put $10,000 in a drawer and open it 10 years later, did you really keep $10,000? Mathematically, no. Emotionally, yes. And that emotional illusion is why this silent wealth transfer continues unchecked. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're actually exposing yourself to guaranteed long-term loss. 7. A question you need to answer honestly. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, when was the last time you evaluated the real value of your money? Not the number, but the value. Most people never do. They know their bank balance, but not what that balance means. They know the price of their car, but not the price of time. They know their paycheck, but not their purchasing power. This ignorance isn't accidental. It's engineered. Because a population that thinks in numbers instead of value becomes predictable and profitable to those who understand the system. And this brings us to the open loop, the question this entire video will answer. Who is gaining, what you're losing, and how can you stop contributing to a transfer you never agreed to? We're going to expose that in segment 2. For now, understand this. Your money is already disappearing. Not through spending, not through silly mistakes, not through failure, but through a mathematical force that punishes stillness and rewards movement. And right now, you're standing still in a world that's sprinting forward. The transfer is happening with or without your permission. The only question is whether you stay on the losing side. You've already seen that your money is silently leaking value. But now we need to go deeper. Because the real story isn't just about inflation. Inflation is only the symptom. The deeper force, the one almost nobody talks about, is the direction of the transfer. Because the purchasing power you're losing doesn't evaporate. It doesn't disappear into thin air. It moves. And the uncomfortable truth is this. 1, your lost purchasing power becomes someone else's advantage. When your dollars weaken, something else strengthens. Someone else gets to buy assets cheaper relative to their income. Someone else gets to pay back yesterday's debts with today's weaker dollars. Someone else gets more leverage, more opportunity, more runway. Inflation punishes people who are passive and rewards people who are positioned. This is the part nobody explains. Inflation is not a neutral force. It shifts power away from the cautious and toward the bold, from people who hold money to people who use money, from people who store cash to people who store value in anything that grows or adapts, not because the system is fair, but because mathematically inertia loses and movement wins. And that's why the silent wealth transfer is so brutal. People think they're being conservative. What they're actually being is drained. 2, the psychology behind bad financial decisions. Now we need to talk about something even more uncomfortable. Why do people keep making decisions that guarantee they'll fall behind? It's not stupidity. It's not laziness. It's psychology, flaws built into the human mind long before the modern economy existed. Let's break down the 3 biggest psychological traps that make people victims of this wealth transfer. Trap number 1, loss aversion. Humans fear losing $100 more than they enjoy, gaining $100. This bias is deeply wired, so people cling to cash because they fear losing it, even though holding it guarantees loss. Imagine a ship slowly taking on water. You refuse to leave because it feels safer on board, even as the water rises past your ankles. You're not making a decision based on logic. You're making it based on fear. Inflation exploits that fear perfectly. Trap number 2, the safety illusion. People confuse familiarity with safety. Cash is familiar. You've used it your whole life. You know what it is. You know how it behaves. You know where it is. This familiarity tricks your brain into believing it's safe. But familiarity and safety are opposites in a world defined by change. What feels safe today becomes dangerous tomorrow. What feels stable is actually decaying. What feels conservative becomes reckless when the environment shifts, and the environment has shifted. Trap number 3, present bias. Humans heavily overweight the present moment. We care more about right now than 5 years from now. That's why gradual losses go unnoticed. They don't hurt immediately. They creep, and anything that creeps doesn't trigger action. Inflation is engineered in exactly the right way to slip past your mental defenses, not fast enough to panic you, not slow enough to ignore, completely just steady enough to feel normal. And that is precisely why it is so powerful. Now let's combine these traps into one terrifying truth. Most people lose their wealth not because of one big mistake, but because of thousands of tiny ones they never notice. And who benefits from their bluntness? 3, the winners of the silent wealth transfer. Let's use inversion again. If inflation punishes people who store money that doesn't move, who does it reward? Those who understand relative value, those who understand optionality, those who understand time preference, those who understand that money is not a static object, it's a velocity. And here's where the discomfort intensifies. People who benefit from inflation aren't necessarily rich. They aren't always CEOs, billionaires, executives, or corporations. Many are simply people who understand one principle. You cannot outrun inflation with stillness. Only movement, and movement outruns decay, movement of ideas, movement of resources, movement of strategy, movement of value. And that leads us to one of the most revealing mental models of all. 4, entropy. Why waiting is the most expensive decision. In physics, entropy describes the natural tendency of systems to move from order to disorder. In money, entropy is the tendency for purchasing power to move from strong hands to weak hands. Inflation is entropy. Delay is entropy. Inaction is entropy. Everything that sits still decays. Everything that stagnates erodes. Everything that doesn't adapt, it weakens. The real danger is not inflation itself. It's the time between inflation and your response to it. Every day you wait, entropy compounds. And here's the math that should make your stomach drop. If inflation averages just 3% per year, again, a number often called normal, your money loses half its value in 23 years. But most people don't start with 3%. They start with a false assumption. I'll deal with it later. And that later destroys more wealth than any recession, crash, or crisis ever could. 5. The real reason. Most people stay on the losing side. Let's confront a painful truth. Most people don't lose wealth because they choose poorly. They lose because they choose nothing. Inaction feels neutral. It feels harmless. It feels like a decision you can revisit anytime. But in a system where prices rise relentlessly, inaction is a highly active form of self-destruction. And the most dangerous part, it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels calm. It feels responsible. It feels like the opposite of risk. But here's the inversion. The riskiest decision is always the one that feels the safest when you're scared. Just think about this. If you're waiting for the perfect moment, you're assuming the future will give you gentler terms than the present. But historically, inflation has never politely paused to give people extra time to act. Your hesitation is not neutral. It's expensive, it compounds, it stacks silently, and it feeds the transfer. 6. The math you must confront. Let's illustrate invisible loss with a simple thought experiment. Imagine you have $20,000 sitting in a bank account. No danger, no volatility, just safe. Now imagine inflation is 7%, a number seen recently in America. That means your $20,000 loses $1,400 in purchasing power every year by simply sitting still. Not losing $1,400, losing what $1,400 could have bought you. That's months of rent, weeks of food, utilities, transportation, medical expenses, emergencies, optionality time. After 5 years, you've lost the equivalent of $7,000 without spending a single extra dollar. You didn't make a bad decision. You just didn't make a decision. And the system doesn't reward stillness. 7. Opening the deepest loop. What happens next, the now? We reach the core question, the one that determines whether you remain on the losing side of the transfer. If inflation silently moves wealth away from people who hold cash, what exactly should people be doing instead? But we're not going to answer that yet. Because before we talk about what movement looks like, before we talk about adaptive thinking, before we talk about inversion and leverage and psychological strategy, you need to understand something even more important. Why most people will never act, even after seeing the truth. That's where the real danger lies, not in inflation, not in erosion, not in bad luck, but in one specific mental flaw that keeps people frozen, even as their money evaporates around them. And once you recognize it, you'll understand why the silent wealth transfer is accelerating faster today than at any point in modern American history. That flaw and the final psychological turning point will be revealed in segment 3. Before we continue, you need to understand something crucial. Everything we've discussed so far, inflation, erosion, loss aversion, hesitation, these aren't the main reason people fall behind. They're symptoms. The real cause of the silent wealth transfer is something deeper, darker, and far more universal. 1. The human brain was not built for modern money. Your brain operates on instincts that are tens of thousands of years old. It was designed to avoid lions, not inflation. It was built for immediate survival, not long-term decay. It evolved for threats you can see, not threats that quietly compound over years. So, when inflation sneaks into your life, slowly, quietly, invisibly, your brain does exactly what it was programmed to do. It ignores it because the threat isn't loud enough. It's not visceral. It doesn't trigger panic. And here lies the tragedy. The most dangerous threats are always the ones your instincts fail to detect. This is the foundation of the silent wealth transfer. Not inflation, not economics, not policy, human psychology. 2, the mental model almost nobody uses, second-order thinking. Most people think in first-order logic. Prices are rising, so I should save more. The economy is uncertain, so I should wait. Things feel risky, so I should stay still. But first-order thinking is what gets people trapped. You need second-order thinking, thinking about the consequences of the consequences. Here's what second-order thinking reveals. If I save more, but inflation outruns my savings, I fall behind faster. If I wait during uncertainty, I lose purchasing power that I will never recover. If I stay still, I guarantee loss, even if I avoid visible risk. This is why Charlie Munger was obsessed with inversion. Don't ask what you should do. Ask what will destroy you, and then stop doing that. In this case, waiting, hesitating, sitting still, letting entropy compound against you. 3, the illusion of control, the most dangerous psychological trap. People cling to cash because it gives them the illusion that they're in control. You can see it, you can count it, you can touch it. It feels like a certainty in uncertain times. But this sense of control is purely emotional. Ask yourself this: if you're holding something that mathematically loses value every year, are you controlling it, or is it controlling you? Let's push this further with a question most people never ask. Why does holding cash feel like control when the math shows it's guaranteed loss? Because your brain is making a simple mistake. It confuses stability with security. Stability is emotional. Security is mathematical. Stability feels calm. Security means you're actually protected. And the gap between those two is where most people lose decades of their life. 4, opportunity cost, the invisible bill you already owe. There's a concept called opportunity cost, but most people never truly understand it. Opportunity cost is not what you pay, it's what you miss. Every decision has 2 costs, the cost you notice and the cost you never see. Inflation preys on the cost you never see. For example, if your money loses 7% of its value this year, that hurts. But the real damage is much larger. You also lose everything that 7% could have grown into over the next decade. This is exponential damage, compound damage, time-amplified damage. It's wealth destruction in slow motion. Think of opportunity costs like this. Every year you hesitate, you're writing a check, not to yourself, not to your future, but to the silent system, transferring your purchasing power away from you. And here's the worst part. You don't get the receipt. 5, why most people wait for clarity and never get it. Yet people tell themselves things like, I'm waiting for the economy to calm down. I'm waiting for inflation to stabilize. I'm waiting for the right moment. But this is emotional fiction. Inflation doesn't stabilize to make you comfortable. The economy doesn't pause until you feel confident. Uncertainty doesn't disappear because you want it to. And this creates the deadliest cycle of all. Things feel uncertain, so you wait while you wait. Inflation continues. Inflation makes things even more uncertain, which makes you wait even longer, which increases inflation's damage, which increases uncertainty, and the cycle tightens like a vice. This is how decades disappear, while people convince themselves they're being careful. 6, fear of loss, the paradox that destroys wealth. This is one of the strangest paradoxes in human behavior. Fear of losing money causes people to make decisions that guarantee they lose money. You fear making a mistake. You fear volatility. You fear uncertainty. So you choose the option that feels safest, even though it mathematically erodes your wealth every year. It's like being afraid of snakes. So you lock yourself in a room, slowly filling it with water. You avoided the visible threat and walked directly into the invisible one. 7. The internal conflict. You feel right now, let's be honest. Part of you feels the urgency, the pressure, the rising sense that you are falling behind. But another part of you wants to ignore it, wants to pretend things aren't so bad, wants to believe you're still in control. That conflict, the tension between awareness and avoidance, is exactly what fuels the wealth transfer. Because every moment you hesitate, inflation continues, doing its job silently and ruthlessly. So ask yourself this: which part of you is winning right now? The part that sees the truth or the part that wants to stay comfortable? Because comfort is the enemy of progress, and progress is the only antidote to decay. 8. The real reason the silent wealth transfer is accelerating today. There have always been wealth transfers. There have always been cycles of gain and loss. But today, something different is happening. Something more powerful, more structural, and more dangerous. 3 forces are amplifying the transfer like never before. Force number 1, higher baseline and inflation, even low inflation, now erodes value faster than the historical average. This sets a higher floor for loss. Force number 2, faster price adjustments. Prices change more rapidly now. Global market supply chains, algorithmic pricing, high frequency, economic changes. This accelerates the pace of erosion, often faster than your mind can track. Force number 3, slower personal reaction. People react slower than the economy moves. By the time someone feels the pain, the real loss already happened. Years earlier, you don't notice you're underwater until you've already sunk a few inches. Combine these 3, and the result is obvious. The wealth transfer isn't just happening, it's speeding up. And here's the twist that creates the biggest open loop of this entire video. We're moving toward a moment, a tipping point, where continuing to hold cash won't just make you fall behind. It will put you in a position you may never recover from, because there is a point where decay outruns the human ability to catch up. And once you cross that line, the mathematics become unforgiving. What is that tipping point? How close are we to it? And what does it mean for your financial future? That's where segment 4 begins. You're about to hear the part almost nobody is willing to say out loud. Everything so far has been leading to one central truth, one that explains why this silent wealth transfer isn't just happening, it's accelerating toward a breaking point. So 1, there is a point of no return. People assume they can always catch up later. That's the foundational myth of financial procrastination. But mathematically, there's so much money that there is a moment when catching up becomes impossible, not emotionally impossible, not psychologically impossible, but numerically impossible, because inflation doesn't rise in a straight line. It compounds, it layers, it spirals, and your losses aren't linear. They're exponential. Here's the truth. There comes a point where the erosion of your purchasing power becomes faster than your ability to rebuild it. Imagine this. If your money loses 7% of its value year after year, that means every dollar you save becomes 93 cents, then 86 cents, then 80 cents. And at a certain point, the compounding decay outruns your compounding effort. You work harder, you earn more, you sacrifice more, but the system drains faster than you can fill. That is the tipping point. That is the line people don't see until they're already crossing it. And in America today, millions are much closer to that line than they realize. 2, why the tipping point comes faster than you expect. The tipping point isn't created by inflation alone. It's created by the gap between inflation and your personal pace of adaptation. Inflation moves daily. Most people adjust yearly. Inflation recalibrates constantly. Most people recalibrate only when they feel pain. Inflation punishes delay instantly. Most people only act when forced, and this mismatch creates a widening chasm. Think of it like two runners on a track. Inflation starts sprinting at mile 0. You don't start running until mile 3, and you start jogging, not sprinting. By the time you react, the lead is so large that catching up becomes mathematically improbable. This is why so many Americans feel like they're drowning financially, even though they're working harder than ever. It's not effort, it's timing, and timing is everything. 3. The danger of feeling fine. The most deceptive part of this entire system is that nothing feels urgent. Your bank balance still shows the same numbers. Your paycheck still deposits on time. Your bills still get paid, barely, but paid. Everything looks stable enough. And that's the trap. Because decay doesn't feel like decay. It feels like tension. It feels like pressure. It feels like things are getting a little tighter. But behind that subtle discomfort, the real damage is compounding, silently, invisibly, irreversibly. The same way tooth decay doesn't hurt until the cavity is deep. The same way termites can hollow a home while the walls still look solid. The same way ice melts from the inside before it cracks. The numbers hide the truth until the truth can no longer be hidden. 4. Your money is already disappearing, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. If the cost of living rises faster than your income, you are losing purchasing power every single day. If inflation outruns your savings rate, you are losing purchasing power every single day. If your cash sits still while prices climb, you are losing purchasing power every single day. This isn't a possibility, it's not a risk, it's not a maybe. It is the mathematical reality of the American financial system. Here's the part you need to internalize. Your money disappears long before you feel broke. By the time you feel broke, the damage is already years in the making. 5. Why this wealth transfer is silent, strategic, and structural. This isn't an event. It's a design. No alarms go off, no headlines, scream warnings, no one knocks on your door to say, hey, you're losing wealth at a rate you'll never recover from. Instead, prices creep, bills rise, savings shrink, stress increases, options narrow, time evaporates. This is how systems quietly shift wealth from the many to the few. Not through force, not through policy, but through strategic decay. Decay so slow you don't respond. Decay so subtle you don't panic. Decay so steady you don't fight back. People aren't losing wealth because they're failing. They're losing wealth because the system is perfectly calibrated to exploit human psychology. 6. The final mental shift. You need to flip one switch in your mind. Stop thinking in dollars. Start thinking in value, because dollars are shrinking. Dollars are misleading. Dollars are the facade. Value is the truth. Ask yourself, is my money holding its value? Is my purchasing power stable or shrinking? Is my financial position improving or eroding? Am I moving or am I standing still while the world moves around me? Once you shift from dollar thinking to value thinking, you can no longer deceive yourself. You can no longer rely on comforting illusions. You see the erosion clearly. You feel the urgency. You recognize the danger, and you finally understand the real cost of inaction. 7. The final warning. The transfer is already underway. The wealth transfer is not something coming in the future. It's not a prediction. It's not a warning about what might happen. It's happening right now. Every hour, every purchase, every paycheck, every moment, your money sits still. Your savings silently bleed. Your purchasing power silently weakens. your financial stability silently shifts, and someone else receives what you lose, not through force, not through conspiracy, through mechanism, mathematics working exactly as designed. The question is no longer, will the wealth transfer affect me? It already has. The real question is, how much more are you willing to lose before you start paying attention? Because the longer you wait, the faster the slope tilts against you. And once the compounding gap becomes too wide, there is no speech, no book, no strategy, and no effort that can restore the value that time and inflation have already taken. This isn't fear, this isn't drama, this is math, and math always wins.